I have 3 bad sleep habits. And because of these bad habits, it's very rare that I even get 7 hours of sleep. And more often than not, I wake up feeling tired, unmotivated, and just awful. But when I do sleep well, I feel amazing. So in order to try and improve my sleep, I'm going to be spending the next 30 days turning my 3 bad habits into 3 good ones. So what are these habits and how do we change them? Bad habit number 1, bedtime. To try and guarantee myself 7 hours of sleep a day, I need to adjust my body clock, otherwise known as your sleep rhythm. In theory, by adjusting when I go to bed in the evenings and wake up in the mornings, my body should adapt to this new schedule, allowing myself to get a little bit of extra sleep in the evenings. Bad habit number 2, caffeine after 12. I love caffeine. I have coffee at work, and more often than not, an energy drink is the first thing to enter my body in the morning. But I have noticed that if I have a coffee or an energy drink after 12, when I go to bed that night, I won't be able to sleep and I'll just feel anxious and lay there overthinking things, which in turn doesn't help me sleep. And then in the morning, I just want more caffeine. So it's a massive vicious circle. So we're cutting down no caffeine after 12. And bad habit number 3, no screens in the bedroom. Now this is by far my worst habit. I am glued to screens. I'll spend the evening on the computer playing games, I'll get off and go to bed, start scrolling TikTok, and then once I put my phone down, I'll open my tablet and just fall asleep watching YouTube videos. I go from screen to screen to screen. So to combat this, I'm removing all screens and devices from the bedroom and swapping my phone out for a book to then try and wind down properly without any distractions from a screen. So during this challenge, I will be sleeping with a Fitbit on as it allows me to track my sleep and how well I sleep throughout the night, which I will be keeping you up to date with throughout this whole challenge. So the main reason removing screens from the bedroom is such a big one for me is because it's starting to affect when I go and stay in other places. And this whole challenge was inspired from when I stayed at a friend's for New Year's. And I was there for 2 nights, and both nights I just couldn't sleep without having the tablet on in front of me. I didn't even have the audio on properly. I had it blaring through my headphones that I just laid next to me. And after the 2 days, I got home and was like, this is becoming an issue. It feels embarrassing to just be laying there attempting to listen to something while I try and sleep. And I thought, this has got to change.
So I'm struggling to sleep and it just feels weird. It just feels weird laying here, listening to the natural noises outside, as well as all the weird little noises that you don't notice that your flat or house makes. And then you're sort of just laying here and yeah, it feels a bit weird.
So how was night 1? Well, at first, it felt kind of weird, but it made me realize how dependent I'd become on just falling asleep, watching a screen, listening to a video in the background. But after I finished reading, I settled down, tried to go to sleep, and actually fell asleep earlier than I thought I would. However, despite my Fitbit giving me a pretty decent score, I did wake up throughout the night and just didn't get the 7 hours of sleep I was kind of hoping for. And because of that, I just feel awful, and it's pretty clear it's going to take more than 1 night to fix my sleep. So as the challenge went on, my sleep would vary from day to day, and this up and down cycle of good and bad sleep would just continue throughout the first week.
So last night I didn't really sleep very well, and to say it's affected me today is a little bit of an understatement. So I looked at the clock earlier, I thought, oh perfect, it's 9:30, I'll get showered, I'll get into bed, I'll read, and then I'll settle down for 11. I look at the clock, it's almost 11, time for bed. And now I've sort of just leant over, looked at the clock and gone, it's not 11 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock. I've somehow looked at the clock completely wrong. Oh my God, I'm worn out, I'm tired. Oh.
Now there's been a small pattern I've noticed during this challenge. Now there's been a couple of times where I've been up late playing games online with friends, and it's kind of been cutting into my bedtime. Now even though I'm still going to bed and trying to settle down and reading for a bit, you can't really speedrun bedtime. And my mind wasn't really shutting off, and I was just laying there, not really trying to sleep, and it would get later and later, and obviously I would wake up feeling worse. So something to note,
playing games into the night isn't good. Who'd have thought it?
So why are screens bad before bed? Now, I'm sure you've heard it all before, but the advice is you shouldn't have screens before bed. Now, this is because the blue light emitted from screens tricks your brain into thinking it's daylight. And when this happens, the body stops releasing a hormone called melatonin. And what the body needs melatonin for is to make it tired and help you wind down and go to bed in the evening. So this is why I'm trying to get rid of screens before bed.
My sleep last night was awful. So last night I had a really good sleep. So after I filmed those over-the-top shots using the stand, I thought, oh, I'll just leave it there. I might need it again. But then my sleep that night was so bad that I actually woke up thinking I was seeing things. And I was like hallucinating that a monkey was hanging off one of these poles. Oh, it was so weird.
Now, the more this challenge has gone on, the more I've noticed I've been waking up with headaches. Now, at first, I thought it probably was the caffeine withdrawal, but given how minimal my afternoon coffees were, this felt kind of odd. And after researching further into it and watching a few different YouTube videos on sleep, it turns out it might actually be down to my new sleep routine, but possibly the time I wake up.
Now this is my sunrise alarm clock. It naturally wakes me up over a 30-minute window using light. Now I have loved being woken up by light instead of this, but it has been waking me up earlier than I'd like, causing me to get the same amount or even less sleep than I had before, leaving me tired and exhausted and even giving me headaches. Now I could find a new alarm or just chuck this away. Or the less dramatic version would be to set my alarm clock a bit later, so when I do naturally wake up from the light, it's closer to my original waking up time, causing me to hopefully get a better sleep. I got a full 7 hours. It's a beautiful day, do. I felt amazing, I felt refreshed, birds were chirping in the sky, the sun was out, I was ready to take on the world. All because I'd adjusted my alarm clock by 20 minutes. Now from my research, it was saying that you should adjust your wake up time ever so slightly each day, whereas I was just letting my alarm clock wake me up whenever. I was doing 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes. No wonder I was getting headaches. So what is our sleep rhythm? Otherwise known as our homeostatic sleep drive, this is what determines when we feel tired and want to go to bed, and when we wake up in the mornings. And this is powered by something in the body called adenosine. The more adenosine in the body, the more tired you feel. So the more sleep you get, let's say 7 hours, this will reduce the amount of adenosine in the body and make you feel more awake. So by having a constant waking up and going to bed time, this allows our body's adenosine levels to peak at just the right time to let our bodies know it's time to go to bed. But now we'd had 7 hours of sleep, the only thing left to do was keep doing it.
As time went on, my sleep began to improve more and more, and the changes I'd been making showed signs they were actually working. Now, the more this challenge has gone on, the more I'm starting to notice that some of these habits I've actually implemented are actually starting to work. The main two being I don't get into bed and just naturally reach out for a phone because it isn't there anymore. And the second being, there's been a couple of times where I've fallen asleep and forgot to set my alarm clock, and I've just naturally woken up at my new waking up time. And it's actually such a good feeling that these things I've been trying to implement and work into my life are actually starting to work. And this string of having 7 hours worth of sleep will continue on and on and on throughout the challenge. I felt amazing. Until I didn't.
So I went out for a couple of drinks last night, which turned into 7 or 8 drinks.
And besides waking up with a different type of headache today, alcohol has definitely affected my sleep. So I've had the worst sleep throughout the whole challenge of about 5-6 hours and woke up with a sleep score of 62, which is the worst I've got throughout the whole of this so far. Who knew alcohol was bad for you, eh? Who would have guessed?
But once we were back on the correct path, everything improved again. Days went past and I finally hit day 29. So tonight I'm staying at a hotel, and in a particularly weird way, I feel this is what the challenge has been building up to. Now, considering that this challenge was inspired by struggling to sleep at a friend's house, it will be interesting to see if I get a normal sleep or even a better sleep from staying in somewhere new and unfamiliar. So across the past 30 days, my sleep score had primarily sat around 85, with my lowest score of 62 and my highest being a whopping 90. But have things changed since the start of the challenge? Well, yes and no. Let's start with the pros. So we start at number 1, caffeine after 12. So pretty early on, I felt rubbish. I could have done with that second cup of coffee or that second energy drink after 12 just to help me get through the day. But from experience, I know having a second energy drink in the evening makes me feel worse the next day, so it would have just carried on and spiraled downwards. So I'm so glad I didn't cave. And not having an extra cup of coffee or especially an energy drink, my mental health and anxiety have been pretty decent throughout the past 30 days. Plus number 2, my sleep schedule. Now my body did become familiar with the new sleep patterns I was implementing. I feel tired earlier and actually go to bed at a more reasonable time. I also naturally wake up around the same time each day now, and sometimes before my alarm even goes off, so this is definitely another plus. And number 3, screens in the bedroom. So I mentioned at the start of the video, I would feel so uncomfortable going to bed without a screen in front of me or just noise from a phone or a video or anything like that. And it was really starting to affect when I'd visit friends or go away. But now that seems to have all changed. I don't have that awkwardness anymore or that uncomfortable itch where I really need to just stick on another video or have something playing in the background. And this is definitely one of the biggest pluses throughout this whole challenge. But now we move on to the cons. At first, going to bed and picking up a book and laying there reading was actually kind of nice, but it made me realize why I don't really do it. And it just became tedious. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some nights I loved reading. I got quite into some of the books I was picking up, but after the first 2 weeks or so, it just felt like a chore. And I would just revert back to YouTube. And this is eventually what actually started to happen towards the end of the challenge. Later on, screens would just start migrating back into the bedroom, let's say. And I really felt like I was going to fall back into some bad habits. However, this sort of didn't happen. Despite having a screen in front of me, my new sleep pattern actually remained the same. And even though I was falling asleep to screens and effectively ruining some of the habits I just created, I was still getting enough sleep and feeling the benefits of it. So with this, I actually started to implement some other changes to help with this, such as blue light filter apps you can get for tablets or phones. And come 10:30, I'd immediately put my phone down, ignore any text messages or notifications. And I found this actually worked just as well for me as reading a book. Now, if you do try and do something similar, this isn't to say that stuff that worked for me will work for you. So if you do want to try and remove screens from the bedroom or go to bed earlier, then your results might vary to mine. But spending the last 30 days working on my sleep, as much as it has been a struggle, I definitely feel an improvement in my sleep and the time I go to bed, even if I didn't outright stick to all 3 of the habits I was trying to implement. I've cut down on my caffeine intake, I have a proper bedtime now, and even though the 3rd habit sort of slipped back into the bedroom, it's made me realize that I can actually go to bed without relying on a gadget or a screen or noise to just help me sleep properly. So now when it's time to go to bed, I can switch off the light, rest my head, and get a full 7 hours of sleep.